G'day, and welcome to David Joshua Forward, episode 108, and on today's show we're taking a look at the new Stream Deck updates. There's a bunch of hardware and also virtual updates that are available, which is a really great time for me because I'm in the middle of rebuilding my rack over here, which is going to have a bunch of Stream Deck things added into it. So we're going to take a look at the virtual announcements, the scissor keys, the modules, the network dock that will get your Stream Deck onto a network, and then also a sort of monitor that they have as a touchscreen. So some really exciting updates to look here in today's episode. If you are new to the channel, we talk about live streaming, video production, photography. Drop your name in the chat, say hi, where you're from, and if you have any questions as we go along, please do ask them, or after live stream, drop them in the comments, and I'd be happy to chat about them. So on today's show, we'll take a little bit of an overview here before we kick off. So Elgato has released a bunch of things, including virtual Stream Deck, Stream Deck scissor keys, so sort of a change of the layout here of like the press action modules, which is a stripped down interface for DIY or third-party companies, network dock, and that'll get it onto the network there, and then there's a bunch of other things that we will talk about in today's show. But let's kick off and talk about the first part, which is the virtual Stream Deck interface or screen that is going to be up there. So this is now, if you imagine your hardware has sort of a certain number of set buttons, now you can have a virtual interface on your display, and it is dynamic. So as you switch applications, the layout or the number of keys, like if you've got blank keys, for example, they don't have to show up on the screen. So let's take a little bit of a look over here and see what this is. So this is the virtual Stream Deck. Note that there is a beta available here, so you can download version 7.0 if you want to do that and get started. There's a link in the chat and in the description to click on that. You'll notice here you can actually like right click to bring up a Stream Deck virtual interface, or you can make it more like a dock like you've got down here, and you can have multiple virtual interfaces all at the same time. So that makes it very handy to have sort of contextual pages added up, and you can have as many sort of buttons in the layout that you want, and if you have empty buttons, they don't have to show up. So very easy to sort of customize it however you will. Let's have a look. This is in beta still, so I'm just going to hide this one. So if we come down here and click on Stream Deck, you can see here I can simply, so I've installed the beta here, and I can click on here and I go add a virtual device, and by default it has created a 6-button screen, but I can turn that off or on, and then I can also modify this. So I could make it more of like a single column if I wanted to do something on the side over here. Let me just drag that across here, and maybe I just want some buttons here, and then I can have, you know, hotkey actions to fill that up however I wish. And you'll notice here the empty spaces aren't filled out. So it's a really nice way of having just the buttons that you need on screen, and if you have dead real estate, that it's not showing up like that. If you click on this little what do you call it, filter like settings here, you can have either fixed or dynamic. Dynamic is like hotkey, so it could be I think I was setting this one up before, Control Option Command Space was going to be my one. So if I hit that, this is the one I built earlier. So you could basically, wherever your mouse is, just say I'm over here and I hit the hotkey, I can bring it up, I can do my whatever I need to click on contextually, and then when I move my cursor off, it is gone. So we've got the space. You can either have it auto hide when the cursor leaves the panel or after you trigger the action. If you actually press on the button, you can change your layout here, hide empty keys. You can turn this off if you don't want that. So I'll go back to fixed, the one I'm building here, and I can keep that on. So it's just always more of a, like I've got one down here, which is a bit more of a dock, as you can see. So if I click on Chrome and Finder, I can sort of very easily quick between click between different applications using the software. Let me just hide this, that a lot of people are very familiar with and has a huge sort of library of third-party integrations. So really nice to have that available. Let me just hide that again. And what else we got in here? You can also change the key size and the opacity, and also the frame color if you wanted to make it a different color. And then also remember, because you can create multiple ones of these. So I've got some hardware here, but I've got 3 surfaces. You could give them different colors. So I can click on my virtual Stream Deck here, and I can go back to fixed. So this is the one I was working with before. So you can have different layouts on different screens, and it's just really, really nice way of bringing that functionality onto a display, either when you don't have hardware or maybe you want to complement that. All right, let's kick on to the next section, which is sort of related to this, but I just wanted to highlight streamdeck, which is a free app on GitHub that you can get, made by Joseph Adams, and it's similar to what we were just talking about there with the virtual Stream Deck. And this is more if you're running Companion. So if you're running Companion as your main sort of server to control your equipment, then you can use Stream Deck on your computer for a virtual interface. I've got the link in the chat if you want to go click on that. It'll download, where are we? It'll look like this. So you can grab your Windows or Mac version here, and then you can open it up, Stream Deck here, and it'll be this little icon up here. I don't actually have my Mac Mini attached to on the network at the moment, so it's trying to connect and it can't. So I can't show you the actual interface. It looks very similar to this kind of layout with the buttons, but basically under settings, you would go in, direct it to whichever computer is running your Companion installation. So my Mac Mini is at .11. Keep the port the same, and then you can just choose however many keys and rows of keys to create the grid size that you want. This is more of a square grid rather than dynamic. And then other settings there for visibility, and just save that, and it'll pop up kind of like this has here. I just haven't got that connected. So just wanted to remind you that that is an option that you have. If you're running Companion, it's a great way of being able to control Companion virtually. All right, next one is the Scissor keys announcement. So as far as I'm aware, this is just for the 15 key layout at the moment. I guess they're sort of road testing this, and you might remember from, like, if you've used Stream Decks in the past, they have more of these sort of soft keys, both on the regulars and the Stream Deck XLs, and also the Stream Deck Plus, which I have over the back here. And some people prefer more of a scissor key, which is like a sort of, cross hatch action, bit like a Mac keyboard, so that if you press one side of the key, the whole key is kind of depressing at the same time rather than it sort of rolling. I've actually never had a problem with the original buttons. I always thought they were pretty good, and I'll go into that in a second, but let's have a look at the scissor keys. So this is the gist of it. You can see here, it's a bit more like a sort of square key, still the same screen underneath. And from what I can see, I'm just going to drag this one out of the way. It's only available in the 15 keys, so you can either get the classic key like this one, or the scissor keys. That's kind of the difference there. If you go over to the 32 button, then you don't have that option yet, as far as I can see. And scissor keys only come in black. But otherwise, the price point is the same as classic and the scissor keys. I actually have a pre-production model that was sent to me last year by Elgato. If I can actually get my camera to focus here. Let me come back to something a bit wider so that it can focus. So this is this is that, and I can sort of show you the clickiness of it. I think the screen might be a little bit different. I'll plug that in. And my pre-production model doesn't have a actual quarter 20 thread on the bottom, but the ones that they're shipping do have, so that'll be amazing to be able to sort of mount that screen wherever you want. You know, for me, you could do it on like a camera rig or something like that. And I'll just sort of show you probably the main difference is like the clicking action. So between these two, let me just see if I can, my camera has been playing up with the focus. All right, so this is kind of the sound of the new clicky ones and the old ones. So the newer clicker is sort of a bit more high pitched, a bit more clickety, and the other one is a little bit quieter. I think I like the travel form factor on this is quite shallow, so that's nice, and it does seem to press very definitively. The model that I've got here doesn't look like it's got the black faceplate in the middle, so it's not quite a true representation of what you would get. The main thing I'm thinking is that just distinguishing, I mean, you can sort of just, it's harder to distinguish between the keys because of their placement, and it's very flat and smooth. I feel like I'm probably gonna have to look down to make sure my hands are on the right keys, whereas with the old ones, I was sort of a bit more, I could just kind of feel across, and I'd have, you know, 4 fingers here, 4 fingers there, and I could do switching that way and keep my eyes up on like a multi-viewer. So I think, I mean, what I would love to see is a one with more keys and maybe sort of more of the button size like the Stream Deck Plus. So kind of like that size keys, just like a little bit bigger, not this kind of spacing between the columns here. I kind of want equidistant spacing, but just a little bit bigger. Maybe I've just got big hands, but that's kind of a little bit of a look at the Stream Deck scissor keys that they have coming out, which is pretty neat. All right, the next one is modules. So this is using the sort of regular, not the scissor keys. I don't think it's scissor keys. I can check. I think it's just the regular keys. But this is for DIYers or third-party manufacturers who want to integrate stream decks into their equipment. So you maybe think like some sort of panel where you want a bunch of buttons to control equipment, or like a PTZ console and you want some buttons to sort of put into the chassis. This is where they're selling now just the actual faceplate. So it's like the buttons, and then on the back end of that is just kind of the raw silicon, which you can plug in to USB. So that looks a little bit like this. So this is the 32 button here, a little bit cheaper in the price. So instead of like $250, it's $200 here. So you're saving on the sort of external aspects of this. So, you know, rather than having, you know, all of this casing material around it, you're really just getting what's underneath in terms of the plate here. Just go through some of the imagery. So, and I guess the screw holes here is so you can mount it onto things easily. So you could have a little fold out desk, so many applications that you could do with this. I'm gonna go over to the smaller one. Really could be like a very low profile, you know, sitting next to a trackpad that's very low profile as well. So I think it's really interesting seeing how this can be integrated into other equipment that they're gonna be having. And I think there's a couple more pictures on here, and you can get in the 6-button version as well. So for example, you could imagine incorporating this into like a wall plate in a smart home, so that you could have a Stream Deck as you walk into the room. Instead of a light switch, you could have a bunch of different buttons to push things, and that could be an interesting way of looking at that. And what else we got? Here's some examples of like building this into a racing console if you wanted to have buttons in there alongside a screen, or putting this into the panel of a PTZ controller. But essentially the same sort of hardware that we're familiar with, and I think it's just the old buttons here. I don't think there's a scissor key buttons from what I can gather. And then the back end of this is basically that sort of raw plate, and you'd have a USB-C connection there to power that. But the advantage here is that you've got a ton, like a huge ecosystem in the background that you can run all the things that that you want to. I mean, the biggest thing with new hardware is often just like the software behind it. Like, does it integrate into everything? Is it easy to use? And the Stream Deck platform and the Stream Deck software is so well developed, and there's so many people that use it and third-party people that contribute to it, that there's a massive knowledge base on the internet and GitHub that, pretty much if you put that Stream Deck into a piece of equipment, you'll be able to control what you want with that. So that's really neat, and just sort of opens up the world, like the ecosystem of which can accept more hardware here, which leads me on to the next point, which is the network dock. So with the regular Stream Decks, they have a USB connection, so that means you need a computer host to plug it into. So if you don't have, if you don't want to run a computer to be able to run the Stream Deck, now there's a network dock. So the advantage of this is more in distributed systems. So if you've got a computer somewhere on your network that is either running something like Companion, or it's running a like the Stream Deck software, then using the network hub means that you can have a PoE Ethernet cable and just send that hundreds of feet somewhere, and then you'll have the little hub that connects to the Stream Deck. So it takes out the need to have a computer at that endpoint to host the USB device. So that looks a little bit like this. It's a little network dock that is really neat shape because it will fit inside of the mount for the Stream Deck XL here. So you could essentially close that up, and then you can see under here means that you have an Ethernet connection that you can connect straight to the device. So for example, or I'm not sure if it fits in the smaller one. It probably doesn't, given the size of it. But it means that, if we click through here, if you are running, a larger venue or a broadcast station or house of worship, and you need to get Stream Deck control further afield, then you can use a network connection into one of these dock receivers. So that's really neat. Let me just see if there's a few more pictures here. Or you could mount it under a desk, and then you've got the short run between the USB out here and into this connection there. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was Companion Satellite, which is kind of similar to the network dock. So if it's not out just yet, but you can achieve, if you're running Companion, you can achieve a similar sort of thing by using a computer using Companion Satellite. So if you don't want to run Companion on your direct computer, then you can run it somewhere else in your network and then use a computer as the host for a Stream Deck. So I use that in my studio with, for example, my unfinished rack over here is going to have has a Mac Mini in it, and that is going to be what is hosting Companion. And then across my, out of this, so this actually is the router that I'm migrating from a router that was in the studio to one that is going to be in the rack, and that's why it's precariously sitting here while I do the live stream. But from that local network, I can take Ethernet out and to my workstation over here. So this is the computer that I do my editing at, or general email. And also, when I'm live streaming, this is the one that I sort of present from. And so this computer can now be essentially that network hub that we were just looking at as the host, the USB host for the Stream Deck device. So I can plug my Stream Deck XL or regular into my computer, and then I can run companion satellite to speak back over the network to the companion installation. So this helps if you have multiple workstations, lots of people can have different laptops or desktops, and they have their workstations and they have their stream decks, but all those stream decks are connected back to one database of companions, so you're not having multiple databases of companion to manage. So you can, and I put this link in the description as well. If you go to user.bitfocus.io/download, you can grab companion satellite. You can also grab companion if you want to install that on the first computer, and then on the second computer, companion satellite in Linux, Mac, or Windows. And when you put that on the secondary computer, it's going to be like this icon here. And you open that up and it will put a little icon up here and you can configure it. And basically the main thing you need to do is just point the address to the computer that is hosting companion. So for me, my Mac Mini is 7.11. And so it's pretty much all you need to change there. And then this will show up in companion as a Stream Deck satellite, which I don't have that connected at the moment. This is offline, but you can see that is where that would show up, just as any other surface in companion that you want to sort of add in to your setup. So it means that you can have one installation of companion and then sort of decide where you want to run or control it via the Stream Deck from. So it just adds some really good options there. All right. Lastly I just saw on the website that had a bit of a tease for an upcoming product, which is the Xenon Edge, which is actually a CORSAIR touchscreen product, but it looked really cool with its integration to the Stream Deck Virtual. And it's also something that I have been using in a similar sort of fashion. So in front of me is a teleprompter, and on top of that is a sort of half 16:9 display, which I use more of like a heads-up display. It's going to be a bit dark, but I can sort of show you a little bit of what I mean down here. So it's very dark, but this is the multi-view, the monitor that I'm in the teleprompter, and then in the dark here is the screen. Not the greatest view of that, but it means that when I'm looking at the teleprompter above it, I have a heads-up display, and I can keep track of like countdown clocks or viewers on a live stream or comments or a bunch of information that you can put up there. And I think that's really useful when live streaming, because it's not just about buttons and visual feedback on the buttons, but there's other sort of data that is better on a sort of display. And that's what I think is really neat around this, what do you call it? Xenon Edge is what they're calling it. So it is this screen here. So again, kind of like a half 16:9 screen. It's touch screen. So you can bring up the virtual screen Stream Deck module here. So you can have essentially like an iPad sort of touch screen of the buttons, but then other widgets that you can place into there. If you were doing the whole computer fan type stuff, you could have that sort of arrangement. I'm not so much interested in that as I am more of this, like the product that I want to see coming is more of like a Stream Deck Pro, which would be a larger Stream Deck console with some rotaries and other input functions, like PTZ joystick or jog wheel, that kind of stuff. And then a heads-up display, very much like this, where it's kind of neat that you've got the touch options here of the Stream Deck Virtual, but really, having things like clocks and countdowns and chat comments and all that kind of stuff, just to keep some of that dashboard info right at your fingertips, would be a really great addition to self-streaming and also just for directing live streams behind the scenes. So that is something that I'm looking forward to checking out, and some of the products that I think they're doing a really great job at sort of putting out products that are just really versatile. So depending on your use case, you can adapt it for what you want. And I really like that. Like, they're not just locking you into kind of like, okay, you're a gamer and you need to use it in this certain way. It's also for broadcast professionals, for live stream producers, all sorts of people can use this even in sort of everyday just editing workflow. Is a really great way of integrating macro keys into your workflow. Let's get rid of this iPad here. Great to have people on the chat. We have Nico, great to have you here, and Alexander, great to have you here as well. And we got Dave, great to have you here as well, and CW Hunter. Thanks for joining the live stream here. Like this review. Nico says, how is the light reflection for the new keys? I find the SD Plus keys the most easiest to read, and the SDXL has a lot of reflections. All right, we can take a look at that. Let me just move these out of the way. It's a good point because, like, for example, even here, so the way that I'm often using actually the controller I'm actually using a lot these days, you might notice, is just my iPhone, which has 2 buttons on it in a web browser. And I'm basically advancing my show through this button here, which is advancing the cues. And then the secondary button is cutting to my Mac screen. It's usually like me on camera introducing something and then cutting to like showing something on the screen. And that's really neat, just on the power saving settings on the iPhone, just always have them off. So it's just, if it's unlocked and not on battery save mode, then it would just always be on and it won't turn itself off. And that's really a really neat device, and I quite like having that big gold button just to push there to advance things. But from my lighting setup, I do have, probably can't see from here, but my key light that's up here is bouncing off here. So it's often trying to place it where I'm not getting those reflections. And same thing with the Stream Deck, depending on where it's sitting, you could get those reflections. So that's the XL, and I could probably detach this one so I can move it around. And okay, let's see if I can get them both to shine. I think they're both going to shine. Bear in mind, this is pre-production, so I don't know if it's exactly like this. It could be a little bit different. Like I said, this pre-production model that I have doesn't have the black dividers between the keys, so you can kind of see more of the screen and more of the clear reflective parts. But I'd say it's pretty shiny, but that could also be just because it's missing the black bits. Let me just have a look for myself. It's about the same. I think the older keys have a dimple in it, so it kind of distorts the light a little bit in the reflections, whereas the flatter keys is a little less distortion, but still not. It's not like a mirror. Yeah, but good question there in terms of it being, I like the main upgrade. Well, I don't think they don't even position it as an upgrade. They talk about it being personal preference between the more gummy keys or the harder clucky keys. And it probably depends on what you're used to in keyboards and how you like to type. Like I said, I really like the low profile depression, and it's very definite to press it. I think for my purposes, if I was to be using this as like a professional shot box for like switching a show, I'd probably want a little more resistance on these keys, because you don't want to be like watching the show and then have your fingers resting on it and accidentally pressing a key. You want to be like definitely pressing a key. But in terms of the action itself, I think it's what you would expect from a scissor key, and there's no misfirings or anything like that. So yeah, if it is your preference for a scissor key, then definitely look into that, because it seems good from what I can see. Does the network dock support all kinds of USB devices or only stream decks? I don't know. Good question. I know I have spoken to Elgato about wanting a hub that could have multiple USBs out so that you could, for example, plug in a keyboard or a trackpad, because like I've had scenarios where I've been doing an install for a client and it's in like the control room where the main sort of controller is sitting is further away from a rack which might have a computer in it, and so you get sort of USB lengths limitations, and so having a device that would bring the the keyboard, mouse, and Stream Deck closer to a desk console would be a really interesting way of doing that. So I would suspect it probably just does the Stream Decks, and it seems like it does most Stream Decks except for like the first generation. So I think the second generation regular Stream Decks onwards accepts all of that. I think it accepts the pedal as well, but the pedal might be only DHCP rather than a static IP, something like that. But other ones, you should be able to set a static IP when you've got the actual keys. I'd be happy to see one from a company that I can trust. The software in my computer. I'm not sure if that's in relation to I trust the software in my computer. I'm not quite sure if that's a comment or a statement. Do you have any videos or guides for streaming like video capture devices and how to set it up? Video capture devices. So I don't think I've actually ever reviewed like the Elgato capture devices. I've got like somewhere in my, I got a lot of stuff here because, as I said, I'm in the middle of building out this rack and I'm waiting for a bit more equipment to come. So somewhere in there is the Camlink 4K is probably the only Elgato capture device that I have. But I haven't used the actual proper record capture cards that they have. The ones that I've been using more is like getting like a Sonnet, dust on that, is going in the rack as well. What's this one? Sonnet Tech Echo Express SEL, which has 4 mini or micro SDI out. So this has got a Decklink 8K mini card in it from Blackmagic. And so that can either capture or it can play out video. So that's probably more where my head is at for capturing in external boxes rather than like putting something into the computer. Yeah, I think if you look back on my channel, you'll see more in terms of Atems and Blackmagic gear and using those things from streaming bridges to web presenters and that kind of stuff. So yeah, if you have any more specific questions, let me know. Do you use Companion with OBSBOT Tail 2? So OBSBOT sent me the original Tail Air, and I did a review of that, and I went once I get my rack set up and I can have all my multiple channels, but at the moment I'm streaming off a spare Atem Mini Pro that I have, and so it's kind of like a makeshift streaming thing. But when I get the rack set up, then I'll have 20 inputs on the Constellation, and I can bring in my Tail Air for more angles on the studio. The OBSBOT, I don't know, is with marketing, like you get emails from companies like OBSBOT who are like, hey, we want to send you a camera. And it's like, cool, let's do it. And then like, there's no follow-up. So I had asked to see the Tail Air 2 camera, but they haven't, I don't know, they went missing. So I haven't actually got to review that, but I would say that the integration of the Tail 2 would be very similar to the Tail camera. It's probably using Visca, which, to answer your question, yes, Companion can control the Visca protocol. So you should be able to control the Tail 2 with Companion. there's a couple of different Visca modules within Companion. I think I'm using the Sony one in Companion. And I also have a profile on my website available for purchase, which controls was built for the Tail Air camera, if you're wondering about that. Speaking of OBSBOT Tail 2, are you planning to do a review for it? Yeah, if they send it, I will be interested to check it out. I've seen sort of varying reviews about some latency or whatever. I think it solved some of the problems I could see with the first version. I'll say the Tail Air, probably the biggest problem I had was that 2 of the 3 cameras that were sent to me, the HDMI out failed on it. And so it's like the HDMI micro connection. So it's not a great connection to begin with, but you know, like literally I plugged it in and it's sitting in it's up here and it's still plugged in actually. I can't show you, I think, but it's just sitting. It's not like I move this thing around. It's just sitting in the studio, and after a couple of months, the HDMI just failed. So I haven't even like plugged and unplugged it. It just failed. So I noticed with the Tail 2, it has a full HDMI as well as SDI. So I'm hoping that connectivity is going to be much more robust. The SDI is certainly very welcome. You know, as I was saying, I'm building out this rack over here, which is taking forever. And I've got a Constellation 2ME, which has 20 inputs, and I've got 6 HDMI converters. So the more I can bring in SDI camera feeds rather than having to convert it means that I have, you know, I've just gone, okay, I'm going to give myself 6 HDMI in and out from this rack, and that's it. So the more cameras I can get not using HDMI means that I can leave that open for, you know, like an Apple TV and things like that. You know, Apple TV is nice because it means I could just grab a secondary laptop and bring in a secondary slideshow over AirPlay things without having to route cables. So things like that will just open that up for more cameras over SDI. Where are we? Blackmagic sounds expensive. It's really variable. If you get an Atem Mini Pro, they're like $300 or maybe more with tariffs. I don't know. Tariffs been weird. Some equipment's gone up like 20% and other things have dropped, and it's all over the spot. Fortunately, I got most of my purchases through just before all the tariffs went through. So there's a bunch of Blackmagic gear that has gone up 15, 20%, something like that. The expensive things, it's funny when you, like when I build out a rack and cost it out, and I have a lot of gear already and I'm buying new gear. Some of the things that were more expensive than I had anticipated were, like I put in this, I have a Unify router here for the studio, but it's like the Dream router, and it's a bigger footprint, and I wanted something I could fit in the rack case so that when I go on the road, the whole network is already set up. All the devices are connected. I'm not having to, put in IP addresses. And so the Cloud Gateway Fiber is an amazing bang for buck. So that is, and it fits within a one use space. So this is now going into the rack. But I was doing I have like a DC power circuit that I was just trying to simplify. So I've like gutted it and pulled it out for the 3rd time now. And I'm like, once I can get this thing, the power level of this, I need all that, just like, smaller cables, less cabling, and because I'm trying to fit a fair bit into a small space there. So things like additional PoE switches and stuff like that have been areas where I'm like, okay, that was a bit more than I anticipated spending there. But most of the gear I've, like the Atem Mini Extreme for video recording, Constellation, You know, I'm sort of reappropriating that. Even like the patch panel down the bottom here was a custom one from Redco Audio that I had built for my original rack, and I'm still using that for the front and back of this one, and then using probably more like so much random stuff, stock standard, you know, D-hole, whatever you call them, patch panels for the audio rack, which is the other half of this. I'll put this one down. Oh, there we go. What else we got in the questions? Ryland says it's much better than the original Tail Air, still not amazing. What are you using for PTZ? So I have two Canon CR-N300s, which I've had for 4 years now, I think. I think I got them in 2021. Can't remember exactly. And they've been mostly good. The 300s don't have as quite good light sensitivity, which is not a problem in here because I can, you know, I'm lighting this and I can kind of control it, so that's not a problem. More recently, I've been having some focus issues with them. I don't know, like, I don't know if you saw before, my top-down shot was just not auto-focusing, and I got to move it around. So, and I'm pretty sure that's a camera, not like a rogue setting that I have. And also this shot, like I turned on the cameras today and it was like completely blurry, and I'm like trying to like refocus it, and then I don't know if they just need to like warm up and they're maybe getting older and the focus is sticking a bit, but that's the main concern I've had with the Canons over a longer period of time. But other than that, they've been really reliable, and I've also, like, they're my go-to camera for installing them for clients when I do like an install. So yeah. Oh my god, I would love to do the wire management on that. Yeah, I know it's like all over the plate at the moment, but I'm just like, it's getting there. It's not too bad. It's like just getting the sort of flow of this. It'll, like, it, you know, goes up the sides to, this is all just sitting everywhere at the moment, just to make sure that I'm trying to avoid cables just like coming out the front and going back in, because I just want them to the sides so that they're organized. And you know, the main thing you're seeing here is the SDIs coming out of the Constellation, and I've got 8 of them going into the Extreme as like an 8-track video recorder. And then I also have like a return feed so that I can get the multi-view of the Extreme into the Constellation. So in my main multi-view setup, I can just kind of monitor if I'm recording in that and what cameras are patched through to what channels. And then I've got a little patched bay down the bottom here for, which you probably can't quite see past the router, for the cameras get patched in there. And then other, like, higher up the numbers in the sort of 10 to 20 input range is more the HDMI inputs and the multi-view input, which apparently they could do internally, I heard, but there was a problem with sync, but that'd be free up 2 more slots. And the Hyperdeck and deck link and stuff like that. So that's kind of like in the higher end of the patching there. But yeah, in the next couple of weeks, I'll wrap that up, and then I can walk you through the patching and the layout of that in the spreadsheet that I've got, because it's a mixture of managing the power structure of it. So I've got some things in the rack that are always on, some things that are my main live streaming circuit that gets switched off when I'm not here, because I don't want it, you know, I don't want to just run the equipment around the clock when I don't need to. And then there's other things like I've got the Mac Mini on its own circuit, so that if I was remote and for some reason the computer froze up, I could crash it and restart it in worst case scenario. And I've also got another circuit, which is a fan circuit, which, so the fans in the rack, I can set up in Companion so that when I go live at a certain point, it cuts the fans because it's really close to the microphone here. But there's an external circuit too, so that the room fan that's circulating, that'll turn off. So I have a circuit that will actually automatically switch off when I go live, and when I stop live, it'll turn the fans back on. So just thinking out the wiring of that, and then within that, I've also got some manual switches, like there's monitors on the front, and there's also the Stream Deck Studio. So they have manual switches so that I can, if I'm not sitting at the rack, I can just switch them off and I don't have to worry about having a screen on that I don't need on, or a Stream Deck Studio that I'm not operating. So just that's where I'm at with all of the trying to get the DC circuit simplified and taking up less space in the bottom, because there's other things that I would love to do with that space instead. Bourne, I was mentioning the software of the 12-inch touchscreen with the third-party software. You can use those that is trusted. I don't actually know much about that screen that we were showing before. I think maybe you're talking about this one. So I'm assuming that this isn't just like a Mac display, you know, it's probably some sort of app, and then within that you're doing the layout, and it's sort of taking the whole control, kind of like the teleprompter does for the Elgato teleprompter. So the one that I have is just like a Mac computer screen in this aspect ratio, and then I'm basically putting a web browser with Companion in it, and I'm just putting big buttons around here for clock countdowns, or sort of, seeing viewer count or other sort of stats that I want on a dashboard. So that's kind of how I'm using my one. But I don't actually know that much about the software, so I can't comment on that too much. Have you ever come across a solution for using a Stream Deck with Companion to flag edit mistakes during a live show that's being cut on Atem to be edited later in Premiere? Yeah, I mean, I think if you look back on my channel, I've done a number of shows around the Google Sheets integration and also the Notion integration, which they call timesheet in Companion. But both of those applications, you can set it up so that you can hit a marker and you're going to timestamp either time of day or like an Atem time code into one field, and then the other fields can be notes or other variable data that you want to put in there. So by default, I have that for all of my shows. When I'm running a proper show, I have a sort of run of show that just starts that, so that at the end of every live stream, I have a ISO record of what went to YouTube. So I have the ISO on a solid state disk, and after compressing it down to H.265 to just save space, because it's a lot. It's an hour every week is a lot of data. It's 250 gig that I can compress down to like 10 gig. But those timecode files would I don't know if you can directly import them. You would definitely have manually you could look at it, and maybe there's a way to take that CSV and convert it. I haven't quite got to the point of a file that you can automatically import into DaVinci is what I've been using for the last couple of years. I would say it's probably totally possible, and there's enough integration in Companion in terms of variables and Google Sheets or Notion that you could grab that data and do something with it. But yeah, in terms of it being automated in the same way that you record an Atem Mini Extreme to hard drive and then can just open up that edit in DaVinci, it's not quite there yet. Is the bandwidth of the Sonnet box enough for 4K 60? I haven't looked into that too much. I mean, it's an 8K Pro, so that would be I think it is. I think it is enough for, yeah, because you can either, run the 4 SDI as a composite of 8K, or you can have the 4 outputs independently. I got that because at some point I'll probably upgrade this to a 4K rack, but I'm more and more in my purchasing, even in like the patch cables, which gets expensive. I'm buying like 12G SDI patch cables rather than 3G. You know, same thing with the web presenter or the Hyperdeck. Like I'm getting 4K versions of that in here because at some point I'll do a 4K upgrade. Even with this upgrade, I did think about doing a 4K upgrade. The main reason I didn't was the recording aspect of it, because there's still nothing really to replace the sort of 8 or 9 track Atem Extreme ISO that I have up here, which is recording in HD. You know, if I wanted to record 8 or 9 ISOs, I would need a bunch of Hyperdecks, and I didn't quite have the space to fit this in this 8U, and I didn't care enough to try and, you know, spend that much money on it, because it's not just it's also the monitoring. You know, it's like, I think that was it. It was like you have your like 4K 2ME replacement that I could fit in the same space as my 2ME HD Constellation model. But if I upgrade that to a 4K, I can record 4K to Hyperdecks, but then all of the monitoring out is like, I need to sort of probably down convert that to HD screens. Like, am I going to upgrade all of my screens to 4K? It's just like those other peripherals become a lot of money, not just the core aspects of the switching and recording. And so that's where I was like, you know what, for now, I already have the HD gear, so I'm just going to stick with that, and just anything that I buy, I just will make sure that it is 4K compatible, which is why the Sonnet, even though it is sort of an 8K output, I'll be using it as 4 outputs at the moment in HD, but if I upgrade to 4K, I could do 4K, and I think you can do 4K 60. I don't know, you'd have to look up the specs on that. I suspect you probably could. Apple TV will get you access to the iPhone and or NDI sources. Very flexy. Yeah, I have been waiting for like 2 years. I probably should just buy it. Like, I have an Apple TV at home for like our main living room projector, but I've got a secondary projector which has Google TV, which is a horrible interface. Or maybe it's just that the projectors that include Google TV in it are way under spec, and it's just the menus are so painful. So I've been holding out to get a new Apple TV whenever they release that, I think sometime this year. So I'm going to get one for the secondary projector at home, and I'm going to get one to put in the rack. But for the moment, I've just got, I wonder if I can pull this over, my Mac Mini, which is just, what's that connected to? I was showing this the other day. This is not the best way to do it. So this is on, but it's actually not, the Ethernet is not connected to anything because I'm in the middle of doing the routing and changing the switching in here, which is why this live stream to me feels a bit hodgepodge, you know, and I'm missing a lot of super source and other inputs. And I've just got 2 cameras and I'm running 4 inputs. So I've got this camera, I've got an overhead camera, my Mac screen or VLC playback, and then the 4th input is H2R on a green screen. So that takes up my whole key capability is taken up with the graphics. So the Mac Mini is, I'm actually going to be mounting it upside down in the rack, and then I'm sticking an Apple TV to it, which hopefully I haven't. You got to put on like a very small amount of double-sided tape, because I did actually rip the whole base of this off. But I had an old Apple TV, which was like from 2012 or something. So that's going to be the Apple TV in the rack until they release a new, something fell out. All right, I got a bit more leeway now because something fell off. I wasn't going to do this one. yeah, so it's going to be mounted upside down, and then the Apple TV is on top. So that'll be sort of flush this way for all of the ins and outs on the back of the rack is where that'll sit. And because this is fan forced, from what I've Googled, the heat should be fine in terms of, like, I don't think it has to be mounted that way up. You can actually mount it anyway, and this way is probably better anyway because, I don't know, the heat goes up. More vents. So I can just put this down somewhere. But the advantage of the Apple TV is, like, all of my devices are Apple, Mac, iPhone stuff. So yeah, it means I could bring up the iPhone very easily. So if I wanted to show something on the phone, I could just, you know, screen share that to the Apple TV. The Constellation could grab that and put it in a, you know, mix effect layer to move it over in a key. And then I could sort of, you know, be holding the phone and demo something on screen via the Apple TV without having to plug it in. I used to plug it in, and it's just, I don't know, there's too many cables back and forth. Or you could even use, like, the Blackmagic camera and use the clean feed out on the phone, and then I'd have a very quick and dirty, you know, for example, there's a number of times I've been wanting to show you something like deep in the rack in here, and it's just difficult to, like, I'm not going to rig up a whole, you know, full camera with a Teradek on it. It's just, it's too much for this kind of thing in here. So having a phone would be really handy to get video in there. That would help a lot. So that's with the Apple TV. Third time building's the charm. It is funny because I spent a lot of time planning it out in a Google spreadsheet in terms of even, like, the side view of, like, what's going at the front, what's going at the back, and the depth between, and the space for cables. And then when you come to it, you know, often you realize there's just a lot less space than you thought there was. And it's trying to sort of downsize some of the components that aren't, you know, it's like trying to find, what have I got? Like, what's this? I don't know. Dumb things like this, you know, like a little flathead computer power cable, because you want to take on the back of the power conditioner. You know, I've only got so much space and I want to get that out there, and then sort of just a little tether to the device or something. So it's things like that that are finicky, and I'm, you know, getting done with it. Zip ties, very good. I have some 8 and 12 inches that I use for that, and that's my main zip tie. Also up in the lighting rig, I kind of use that for cables and stuff, sometimes just like looping up cables. That's the other thing I'm going to do with my rack is I've been sort of rethinking how to put everything in here. So I have this Netgear 16-port PoE 200-watt switch, which I'm more and more just going across to the Ubiquiti switches because I can manage them. This is like an unmanaged switch. But I think I'm going to take this out of the rack because I have things like the camera PoE, you know, I've got like 5 PoE cameras and the DMX converter box and some like Dante out, which is PoE. Like those things, I don't need another 8 network cables coming down and taking up space here. So I'm going to create what I'm calling a node, which is going to be an external satellite away from the rack, just to simplify some of the cables coming into here. So I still need to bring in SDI and stuff like that. But for the networking side of it, there's going to be this is the main box. There's a cable that will go to a secondary box, which does the audio. And there's also going to be a cable to, there's a cable to Wi-Fi, and then there's a cable that will go up into the lighting grid. And that'll be on a PoE switch. And that'll be something that is on a Wi-Fi plug. So when I walk out of the studio here, I will just kill the power to that switch, and then that'll turn off all of the cameras, and it's also turning off lights and stuff like that. So it just sort of managing it that way, and just taking out some of the cables coming into the back of this, into the main rack. What do you think of the new Hyperdeck? It looks pretty cool. I think, like, depending on what you're doing, you know, if you're sitting at a desk and you need the screen, then it's probably good. Let me Hyperdeck. I can't remember the name of it. Shuttle 4K Extreme something. Excuse me. There we go. Yeah, it looks neat, you know, having the screen, and it looks like they're sort of building that in for the replay maybe as well. I don't think I'll get it, because a lot of what I'm trying to do is build all of this into the rack. But we've got, what have we got? Headphones, some 12G SDI ins and outs and loop outs, HDMI, external disk. I don't think there's a Thunderbolt, does it? Ethernet, SD card. I mean, it looks really neat. And if you needed video playback and you had an operator sitting at a desk, I would probably do that. For me, my Hyperdeck is in the rack, and, you know, on today's video, streamdecks is what I'm using to control the Hyperdeck via Companion. So, like, my workflow is very much around Companion as kind of the core controller, and then things like streamdecks to physically do the input, to cut shows, to playback video, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I even with what was I going to say? I did put a monitor on the front of the rack, because I figured it would be, rather than just like a big black box that's the brains, which is generally how I treat it. And I can't really turn this around because it's all precariously put here, but I will show you on future live streams. I've got a 3U, like 2 monitors on the front of this, which are patched into the outputs of the Constellation. So it means I can sort of see anything that's on the Mac Mini or the video inputs and multi-view, and also send that out to floor monitors from there. But if I turn up at a venue where I need a really small footprint and I just need to like have the rack and sit in front of it and switch, I can do that, even though normally what I'm doing is setting it up somewhere more for patching, and then I would have a desk next to it which would have stream decks and monitors that I'd be switching from. Is there an easy way to turn off PoE ports in the Unify software? It would be nice to have a companion button to all the PoE ports the same way there as a Casa switch. This is a great question, because that's what I have faced. Let me see if I'm rolling around on cables. So I'm in the process of like migrating my Unify router from the Dream, what was it, the Dream router, UDR, over to the Cloud Gateway Fiber, which was actually really easy. You just export a backup, and then in the new router, just, you know, import, like set that up from that, and, you know, once you switch off the old router, all the Wi-Fi devices kind of pop across, and so that's been relatively easy to move that across. Let me just move this over here. But on the PoE is like, let's see if I can find some ports here. Ports, and I need a PoE port. PoE port. Trying to think if I can see this one. Okay, I think I've got this one here. Let's drag this over to there, and what do we got? Mac. So the ports are like, you can either like power cycle, or you can turn the PoE on or off in the settings. But you can't, it's not like you have an app. So the one that I'm using all the time is, I'm going to open this one up. It's CORSAIR. So the CORSAIR app is what I have all of my studio running on. So I've got a power strip with different circuits on it, and I've got like this 2 point whatever is like all the lights on different circuits. And then I've been adding in the rack plugs that are inside of the rack. And then I got a few random ones for like house lights and fans and stuff like that. So I'll use that on the computer. It's also neat because I can just sort of bring it up on the desktop. And then also on the phone, I can bring up on like on the CORSAIR app. So it means I can actually just like walk out of the studio, and on the phone I can switch things off. And I can also create, as you can with, it's no secret, what do you call them? Scenes and stuff like that. So I have a scene for like depart the studio is like just, switches everything off. And what else have I got? A live streaming one, so that when I want to do a live stream, I just switch that on and all of the appropriate things come off. I've got an editing setting, so editing kind of like switches off all of the live stream stuff, but it turns on things like the audio monitors here for, editing with audio, which I don't want on when I'm live streaming. And then I've also got one for programming, which is kind of like all of those things on, so I can like listen to music while I'm programming stuff with the live stream. So it's really neat being able to power manage that in an app, and the CORSAIR app does that. That's just why, where are my plugs? I think I've got ones, they're in the rack at the moment. I think I've got some down here. So these are the older ones. They're called the Mini, but then there's a new one which is called Mini, which is smaller. And the new small ones actually fitted into the power conditioner between the wall wart spacing, like the ports that is further apart. So I was actually able to get 3 or 4 of those into the rack. And I also have this Unify plug, which I've had for quite a while, but I never actually ended up using it because it doesn't really integrate to an app in the way that you would have in a daily use of like switching something on or off. You've got to go into the app and like manually switch it off and on. And if you've got a lot of plugs, it's not very, not very fast. And then I've got under, let me see if I have where's my topology? Plug. Settings. Okay, so this is it's not plugged in because it's, not plugged in. So the USB plug that I have here has a manual thing for outlet power. So you'd have to like click outlet off and then apply changes, so it's a very laborious back-end settings, not really app friendly. But you have other usages that you can use it for too. So you could have it as modem power cycle, so that if your router loses internet, you could have this plugged into the modem itself to automatically turn it off and turn it back on. Or you could do a manual power cycle remotely. So I think this is where the Unify plug is more useful, is like on a sort of, automated recycle if the internet goes out, or if you manually want to, like I could plug this into my Mac Mini and just always have it on unless for some reason I have a crash and then I have to go into do a power cycle. And I guess you could also have one on the router. I don't know, you probably wouldn't want to. I mean, my router is just kind of like always connected to the mains. But if you did have this upstream of a router, then the power cycle feature means that, you set it to turn off and then it will automatically turn back on. Whereas a CORSAIR switch, like if you turn this off, then you've lost control to the switch because you've killed the router that it's attached to. So there are kind of different use cases for some of those plugs that you could use it with, but that's kind of how how I'm using it. What 12G SDI patch cables are you using? I think I put this in last stream, in the last live stream. BH, so the 12, are they Elvid? Can't remember. Let's just go, what are we going to call it? We're going to call it SDI patch cable. I'm going to type in cable. Patch cable. Blah, can't spell. Hang on a second. Gotta find this. And I also have to learn how to spell. Cable. Yeah, patch cable. There we go, Elvid. And then I'm also going to get Amazon, this one. Okay, so these are the ones. These are the ones that I've been using. So let me just click over to here, and here we go. Okay, so the Elvid Slim SDI cable is what I've been using. Often find like 2 feet's a really good sort of default length. I mean, you know, it depends on what you're trying to, where you're trying to get it to, but they come in 1, 2, and 3 feet. So they've been fine. I haven't had any problems with them, and they're rated for 12G. And then on Amazon, I have some of these 3G SDI cables, mostly just because they're cheap. And again, I haven't had any problems with them. So I've had these since like 2020 or something. So you can just get a lot more patching for your money. So I did buy some more recently just because I was trying to do a lot more patching to a panel which already had 3G. So as much as I didn't want to buy more 3G, I was like, all right, I'm just going to buy a couple more because they're, it's like half to a quarter of the cost or something. So, but they're the ones that I use. While the Canon CR-N300 is connected to an Atem via SDI and outputting an HD signal, is it possible to simultaneously send a 4K signal through HDMI port? No. I'd have to double check. I'm pretty sure if you set it to 4K, the SDI, because you can only do 3G out of the SDI port. So if you set it to 4K, it would disable the SDI port. I can't remember if you could. I think maybe you can do both SDI and HDMI on HD. I can't remember exactly, but I do know I've tried to do that for a Hyperdeck backup, because I remember I was trying to get the main feed into the switcher, and I thought for this main shot here, I was recording something, and I was like, well, it's recorded in 4K, and so I was trying to get the 4K HDMI out into a Hyperdeck, and I couldn't do it. It was you can only do one format. Those things are already hot stacked. It's going to be even hotter. Maybe put a fan in there somewhere. There's going to be a fan on the back side here, so there's going to be fans coming out there, and I'll keep an eye on the heat. Let me see. The thing that puts out heat by far is Atem SDI Extreme ISO. Everything else in the rack is pretty manageable. I think the Constellation gets a bit hot, so there's nothing. I don't have anything above that. There's a bit of heat from the screen too, I guess, when that's on there. There's nothing up against that. And then I've got some shelving like this, which is pretty perforated to have a lot of airflow through the layers. And then the Extreme is going to be sitting here, and then the fan will be there. So it should be, a lot of the heat will be coming, I think it comes in the sides and straight out the back. So a lot of this stuff is back facing, and so hopefully a lot of that heat will come out directly rather than sort of circulating in the rack. But you know, we'll see. How do you manage all the accessories for a gig, like monitors and cables and cup holders and cable holders? I think it was the same one. How do you manage travel with all the accessories like cables and monitors and cameras? I don't fly with this. Like, it's, yeah, I think it's mainly driving. So, you know, I've done shoots down in DC or whatever, so maybe like driving 4 hours. I don't think I'd want to put this on an airplane because knock it around or whatever. But so this particular fly pack or whatever, I'm thinking of it more as like I'm doing jobs that are within driving distance of New York. And if I had a shoot, like, I mean, most of my travel shoots are sort of field recording anyway, like you know, like brand videos and things that aren't live streaming. You know, if I had to do a live stream in San Francisco, I'd probably hire some local gear for that. For local shoots, I mean, these, for transport, these boxes, you know, box up. You can put the front and back on them, so they're pretty self-contained. They go on a trolley. I've got 3 Pelican 16-15 Airs, which are sort of the maximum regular check-in size for an aircraft. So that's usually what I fly with in terms, but that's more shooting on, you know, the C200 or the R5C, you know, that kind of more single cam production stuff. They've been really good. I love those, the Pelican Airs. And then there's times where I've got some bags which I can get a bunch of cables in at a, I don't even know what it is. I can't reach it from here. I can see it over here. It's like a Swiss rocks or something. Anyway, so there's other like cable bags that have a strong structure that I can put on top of a Pelican case, and then crew members can like wheel them. And it just depends on the shoot size, whether it's putting a whole bunch of stuff on a trolley or if it's a couple of people grabbing cases on wheels, is kind of how I travel. Low pro Pelican. I have some low pro stuff and I have some Pelican stuff. Yes. Like something you would put on a camera rig. Automating all that stuff even a few years ago was a nightmare. How much easier is it now? I mean, I've spent a lot of time in Companion, so I feel very confident in programming a lot of complex equipment. And you just sort of do it piece by piece and you build out a show. So that's why the way I've designed things is more having a brain that will do the, you know, video processing, the routing, like all that kind of stuff in a single box. And then separately, I'll have like a workstation where I'll sit at a monitor. So sort of separating those two things between the rack that's doing all of the thinking and then the workstation, which is the monitor and the keyboard and the stream deck, is kind of how I separate that. And when I'm not building a rack, I do like to have this completely clear. But yeah, there's a tons of junk everywhere. Yeah. All right, I think that's probably about it for today. I need to get back to finishing this rack because it's like, you know, there's always like a little thing that holds up the next thing. You know, it was like, you know, got to get the router set up before I do the Wi-Fi plugs, and then, you know, I want to get the Wi-Fi plugs in a certain spot and just trying to get all the cabling neat and down and out of the way so that you have access to the devices and all that kind of stuff. And it just takes time, and then you have to sort of backtrack. And anyway, I'm getting there, almost done. Waiting on a little bit more gear to come probably tomorrow, and then it's Memorial Day. So maybe like within a week, I will have the bulk of this up. I did at one point, I had the rack's up and running and I was starting to do the programming side of it rather than the hardware install. And then as I said, I wanted to refit a DC circuit to reduce some of the cabling. So that's what I'm working on now. But thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all the questions. It's been really great to chat about that. Pretty much every week, Thursdays, Eastern, 2 p.m. if you want to listen on there. Otherwise, thanks for joining. And davidjoshuaford.com is my website where you can go to download profiles to control Companion to make your live streaming easier. Until next week, take care. I'll see you then.